Major funding for this program is made possible by grants from Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, and Perfect Building Maintenance, New York Community Bank, Kilroy Architectural Windows, Inc., New York's window company, Capital One Bank, Greenberg Traurig, LLP. Additional funding for this program is made possible by grants from AVR Realty Company, LLC, Briarwood Organization, Beechwood Organization, C.B. Richard Ellis, Cushman & Wakefield, Dime Savings Bank of Williamsburg, Hal Fettner, Durst Fettner Residential, First American Title Insurance Company of New York, F.J. Siami Construction, Friedman LLP, Gemini Real Estate Advisors LLC, Investors Savings Bank, Jack Jaffa and Associates Real Estate Consultants, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, Madison Realty Capital, Massey Knackel Realty Services, M&T Bank, Markham LLP, Marcus and Millichap Real Estate Investment Services, Meridian Capital Group, The Moynihan Group, Margolin Weiner and Evans LLP, Newmark Knight Frank, Orphanides and Associates, SJP Properties, Sterling and Sterling Inc., Stonehenge Partners, Urban American, The Witkoff Group.
Hello, my name is Michael Stoller. You know, New York City has many interesting characters and operators. And you know, through my 65, 70 Building New York shows, I've had some interesting and unique people. And today I have a person who even won 25,000 feet in Mount Everest, who, you know, was in the printing business, and now he's one of the largest operators of Applebees, 35 of them to be exact, in the Metro New York area, and I'm really happy to have Zane Tankel today.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks very much.
So Zane, you were, you know, I'm a Brooklyn guy. I always love Brooklyn guys. Maybe today I won't, but you were even born in Brooklyn. You were born in Brooklyn, and then your dad and your mom and dad moved to New Jersey.
Correct.
So they moved to, you tell everybody on your bio that you moved to Patterson, but you really moved to Halden, right?
Right.
So tell me about those years in Halden. You know, you were a wrestler?
Yeah, I was. Actually, it's Halden, not Halden, Halden. And actually, my dad grew up in Patterson, and it was, I guess, his idea to go back there. So as close as he got was Halden.
So you go to Halden, and then you said, you know, you were a tough kid. You know, you said you were really a tough kid. Your father was in the printing business, you know, printing salesman, and you went, your first 2 years of high school, where were you?
I was away.
Away, a military academy, or what was it?
Call it a boarding school.
A boarding
Not
school.
a military academy. It was a little worse.
So after the boarding school, you come back to New Jersey, and then you spend a year, right? Mm-hmm. And then you go to the Hunt School in Princeton. Mm-hmm. I mean, fancy, you're going to the Hunt School. Now here's the interesting situation. Your dad says, hey, what are you going to do, right? You want to go to college or you're not? What happens?
Well, I didn't want to go to college. I wanted to go in the military, actually. And it's fortuitous that I didn't. As a favor, I promised I would apply to a college, and I applied to the University of Pennsylvania, the Wharton School, very specifically, the University of Pennsylvania, and lo and behold, I got in.
Now, you go to the Wharton School, and you many people say, you know, I want to specialize in economics, business management, pre-law, something like that. You do sociology?
Yeah. Well, everybody that graduates Wharton gets a BS in economics. That's the degree you get. But my major was sociology, correct? And I guess it has to do with growing up, being a tough kid, growing up in And at that time, candidly, somewhat of an anti-Semitic neighborhood. We were a Jewish family. It was first generation Italians. Most everyone's father was single parent workers then, not mother and father, worked in the textile mills in Paterson, and commuted by bus to Paterson, and came back to Haledon. Haledon was the place to live if you were working in Paterson. As you worked your way up through the economic scale, I guess it was a poor town, but it wasn't as bad as Paterson per se. Maybe that's why I say I was from Paterson, because that was tough.
So now you graduate from Wharton, and what do? You have a degree? What do you want to be? You want to be a wrestler? I mean, what are you going to be? What was the next step?
Well, I wasn't sure as you graduate. In fact, today people ask me, when they're the young kids, what were you going to do? We have about 3,000 people in our company, and most of them are trying to find their way. And I say there's nothing wrong with not knowing exactly where you want to be.
You went west.
I went west. I traveled first. I traveled up into Canada, and I worked in odd jobs here and there, and that was a time when Route 66 was a very hot TV program, and I was smitten with Route 66 and all the allure and romance of just traveling and getting a job here.
So you end up in the West Coast.
I wind up in San Francisco, California. Tried to get a job on a tramp steamer, which was really my goal, to travel the world. But there was a recession in 1963, or there about 62. Sorry.
And you get a job in the insurance business.
I take my sheepskin, much against my better judgment, my Wharton degree, and I get a job on the executive training program at Metropolitan Life Insurance Company.
To sell insurance?
No, I was in charge of their loan records department. And as you paid down your loan against your insurance policy, you recalculated what the interest and the principal were. And I had a battery of 50 Burroughs adding machines, and they weren't computers, and it's dark ages.
Tachometers, you remember?
The
Frieden machines.
That's exactly what they were.
Because the Frieden machines you were able to multiply and
exactly,
right?
With the long carriage, and exactly. And I sat in a glass office, and I looked out over these 50 women that were calculating insurance premiums, and it was.
How do you leave San Francisco and return to New York City?
Well, everything, I guess, has a story to it. I just was going bananas being in the Metropolitan Life Insurance. No offense to Metropolitan Life Insurance Company, but that wasn't why I came to the West Coast, and it wasn't who I am as a person. So I don't mean to knock that job or people that do that job, but it certainly wasn't.
It's all part of the career advancement, all part of the goal. So you come back here, and your dad was in the printing business, and you figure your father says maybe you should go into the printing business.
No, it didn't quite happen like that. Coincidentally, it happened that I met a fellow in San Francisco that rode show horses for the then chairman of the board of Avon Products. And I was talking about coming back east, and he said, if you do, go back and meet Michael Stoller. I forget his name, but Michael Stoller. You need to call him, and he can get you a job in Avon. So I did that, and he was most gracious, had me come up to his office and said, what do you want to do? And I wasn't sure and at that time, and I think it still is today, Avon only sells from a printed product, from a brochure. And so they bought.
Today they've gone to the internet also.
Are they on the internet? Well, then it was only the brochures, and they were the largest buyers of printing in the world. And coincidentally, my dad is selling printing, but it has nothing to do, no relationship with it. And he said, why don't you sell printing? It sounds like a good idea. It happens to be in my family.
But the interesting story, how did you get to the printing? You got to the printing via the union,
right?
And
right.
Let's go.
Well, I went to. I thought about how would I get a job, and so I called the president. His name was, I think I'd forgotten when we talked last. Ed Swadock, who ran the Amalgamated Lithographers Association, ALA, and it was a very, very strong union in the city of New York. They controlled all the lithography printing presses in the city, and I called him up. And I asked him if I could come down and see him. I was 23. I'd just come back from California. And he was most gracious. And I told him I think I could get the Avon Products account. And what printing company in the city, commercial printing company in the city of New York, would be most receptive and could do that kind of business, that quality of work. And he sent me to a guy, actually I remember his name too, Manny de Torres was his name.
And this was Collier's?
No, well, it wasn't at that time. It's Manny de Torres, and I don't recall, we're really digging deep now, but I remember his name was Manny de Torres, and I went down and I saw Manny and I said, I think I have, was set up by Swaduck, this meeting, that I have this Avon account, and he was just Google about that. And P.S., I got a job there, and the company was owned by 4 elderly gentlemen, Manny being one of them, and one by one, I over a period of half a dozen or so years.
Now, you said to me when we got together, you know, it's a little bit, it's like the show Mad Men. The agencies had an involvement, there was a control, you had to take care of, I mean, you know, a lot of this, when you watch the show Mad Men, it's true in many aspects.
Absolutely true.
The agencies and the companies, they controlled even the printing and everything else.
Controlled it
so
all.
you did something different at that time.
I decided to try and structure, called the name Collier, by the way. Collier, and if you look it up in the dictionary, I know you're big on research, but you didn't do that one. That's a hardworking, Collier is a coal guy who digs coal, hardworking person. And we changed the company name, Manny de Torres' company, to Collier. And I decided to set up our company as an agency, as an advertising agency. I would be the sales guy. I'd already controlled a fair amount of business and was expanding our position within the Avon organization at that time. Millions of dollars, not initially, but as we grew and grew. And we set it up with account executives. And the account executive, I would bring in an account, and I would say, Michael, you're in charge of this account. And you were the account executive and handled the account. So we didn't have commission salesmen. It was a very, very trying time in the graphic arts business because payola was renowned. Many people went to jail. Many people. I was actually the subject of an investigation, not a target, but a subject of an FBI investigation, where numerous and sundry people did go to jail. In fact, one only came out, believe it or not, just about 2 years ago. Tried to make contact with me, but it's not.
Now, during that period of time, you opened up a couple of locations: Boston, Detroit,
correct,
Los Angeles. So you had you had a big company.
Yeah.
And then it's interesting because then everything is timing in life, and suddenly you needed space for a different location. You were opening up. And you went to 240 West 40th Street.
Exactly.
And what happened over there? This is your first building. You really, truly get lucky on this.
I really, truly get lucky. Again, I guess it's interfacing with elderly people. This building is owned by 3 elderly gentlemen. We move in our plant. We're on 2 floors. All businesses are evacuating the city. And I don't know, you would recall better than I when the city was really, when the president said drop dead to the then mayor, and the city was in dire, dire straits. And I wrote an op-ed article that the Times, I was fortunate enough to get printed in the Times, saying if they want to go, let them go. And to all these cities, Cheeseboro Ponds, I remember it was one, not cities, companies that were leaving the city, evacuating the city for the suburbs. And why don't you foster the companies that are growing, that are in the city, and grow new trees?
And you got lucky.
And I got very lucky because the city then, not because of my article, but the city was setting up a quasi-governmental agency, the Industrial Revenue Agency, and we're selling IRB bonds. And I got the very first industrial revenue bond in the city of New York, and bought our building, which was a 14-story building at 240 West 40th Street.
Now, the interesting story was that's when Times Square was changing, right?
We bought it, and 3 years later, there was a big article in the New York Times. Actually, the Times had a lot to do with my success. It's the first time I actually related it. There was a big story in the New York Times that said that the condemnation proceedings of buying all these strip tease joints and strip movie houses on 42nd Street was approved, and they were going to sell bonds and make it into a campus-like environment. And they had actually.
So let's look at it this way. That's close to maybe 30 years ago, 25 years ago,
30,
at least
certainly,
30,
yeah.
30 years ago. Would you have ever thought in your mind that 30 years later you'd have two restaurants, one restaurant 2 blocks away, never in
No,
your life?
never.
Never even think you'd be in the restaurant
no
business.
Way, no way.
So that happens, and that really changes your business, you're changing in life. And then subsequently, you really phase out of the printing business. And how many Jewish guys from New Jersey go to Mount Everest? And you were telling me, because it's a great story, you were part of this small exhibition.
Well, I had actually been climbing. I had read an article flying to one of our plants. I was sitting, in fact, he tells the story better than I, next to our CFO in the printing business, and we're flying to Detroit from New York, and I'm reading one of these in-flight magazines, and there was an ad for wilderness expeditions, a survival course. And I showed it to him, and he said, you're crazy. And it just made me angry, the way he said it. And he didn't say it in a complimentary way. He was saying it, and I just do these things. So I filled it out, and I sent it in, and I signed up for this wilderness course, survival course, which was held up in Western Canada, Alberta. And I met a bunch of guys who were climbers. They were teaching this survival course, and they were professional climbers. And that led, after I finished this course, that led to being invited with them on a climb in Canada. And that went from one to another to another. So for about a decade, for 10 years, once a year I'd go on an expedition with them. And then they were also on a major expedition, the first major expedition to Everest from Nepal, and they lost 4 people. 4 people died, and half the team had evacuated that expedition and immediately filed for a permit to go from the Chinese side 4 years later. And they invited me to join them on that climb. So I started training 4 years early, and I was one of 14 climbers who climbed the first team from the Chinese side. They just opened up Tibet, and we crossed the Tibetan plain, which in itself took about a week, was an experience in itself. And I got to, we carried our own loads. We didn't have any Sherpa support, and I got to about 25,000, and then aborted, frankly. I left the expedition.
You come back to New York, and you go into your first restaurant endeavor. How do you decide to go into that? I mean,
well,
bought some real estate, restaurant?
Yeah, well, when I got back, I bought a building on 65th Street, and I used to eat around the corner at a restaurant all the time called Marigold, and got to know the owners there pretty well. And about 6 months after, and it was a fairly short time, the owner of Marigold thought I was a reasonably good businessman here. I'd bought this brownstone. I'd had some money, a little bit of money, because I'd sold our building on 40th Street. And he said he was putting together, would I be interested in getting involved in being the business guy for putting together a celebrity group, Regis Philbin, Mikhail Berezhnikov, and a bunch of folks like that. And we were going to buy and open a restaurant on 69th and Columbus Avenue called Columbus. And I became a partner in Columbus.
And then from Columbus, there was Cameos?
Cameos, right. Then I thought that was so easy, because nothing to do with me. It had to do with Berezhnikov, who was then the principal dancer across the street at Lincoln Center, and he was
everybody wanted to be a celebrity.
Everybody wanted to touch him. Everybody wanted to touch Regis. Regis would talk about it on his show. That he was, where's he going? Where do you want to go to lunch today, Kathy? He would say, well, let's go to Columbus. And I thought that was so easy. I opened up built and opened a small restaurant a couple blocks south of there on 67th and Columbus Avenue called Cameos.
So it's 1993 or 1994?
Yeah, 3, I think.
1993, and what was the name of this place? Steak something?
Oh, Santa Fe Steakhouse.
So tell me about Santa Fe Steakhouse.
Well, it was an idea that Alan Bernstein, the then and still very active chairman of Morton's Steakhouse, wanted to get into a lower end steak concept, and they were looking to joint venture it with some joint venture partners. And he told me about it and asked if I was interested. And I said, yes, very much so. And it was based in Cincinnati, I believe, Ohio. And we flew out to Cincinnati. And
But it was a lower, not
lower
in
end.
the, lower end than Morton's.
It would be in a,
like
in a
Sizzler?
Lone Star Steakhouse. No, Sizzler would be low end in price-wise. It was like a Lone Star Steakhouse or
The Blooming Onion, whatever that is.
yeah, right. Yes.
Whoever that is.
Yes,
I know.
right.
Okay.
We don't have to give. We don't have.
Right.
No, not chill. I know what you mean.
Yeah. But it was a steakhouse type of thing.
It was a steakhouse, a lower end steakhouse.
So what happens? You're ready to open up this?
Well, it turned out that it wasn't exactly all legitimate in some respects. I don't know exactly how it fell apart, but in the process of investigating going into that, I met a fellow named Roy Rayburn,
who happened to be and this is,
Roy
for
Rogers.
our older people here will remember there were these franchisees all around New York, New Jersey,
Yeah.
Roy Rogers restaurants that sold hamburgers and beef, roast beef, right?
Right.
They were like
Right.
Arby's, and they
Yeah.
were a major operation.
Yeah,
And
they were.
He was a franchise.
He was a franchisee. He had, I think, 10 Roy Rogers, 12 Roy Rogers restaurants. And the franchisor just decided they were going to go out of that business. And a bunch of these Roy Rogers franchisees had identified this concept of Applebees, which was based in Kansas City, Kansas, where they still are today. And I'd met Roy, and he told me about this concept, that he was going that way. I told him about Santa Fe. I was going this way. And we said, maybe we should kind of get together.
Now, the interesting thing is, so you open up your first one, you get refused. They turned you down, right?
Our first site, yes.
The first site you wanted to open up in the Staten Island Mall, which was a great mall. It still is a great mall over there.
The only mall in
The
Staten
only mall, because there are a lot of strip shopping centers in Staten Island. And you go there, and Applebee's turns you down.
Right. They turned us down because they said we were in the back of the mall, and you needed to really be in the front of the mall for visibility purposes, which sounded logical, and we had some arguments with them. I wasn't a franchisee kind of guy, and I didn't understand you can't spend your money because they say you can't.
They tell you how to operate.
Right, tell you how to operate. And I went to Kansas, and I met with the chairman of the board, and bottom line was, I said, it's my money, and he said, it's my brand. And we made a compromise that we would use his brand and my money, and he gave us permission to open that restaurant.
So that's 1994.
Yes.
And since then, you've been in every one of the 5 boroughs.
Absolutely.
And Westchester and Rockland. Now, let's, really, people say Applebee's, and, they're operators, and I was joking, but I mean it as a compliment. A number of years ago, you opened up right after 9/11, Applebee's in Times Square, 2 blocks away from 240 West 40th Street.
Correct.
Now, how many people come there a week? I mean, it's the highest grossing Applebee's in the world. In the world.
Well, if you use the average check numbers that I use, we do about 20,000 people a week pass through the doors of Applebee's on 42nd Street. 20,000 meals.
And that's for lunch and dinner. There's no breakfast.
We do breakfast there as well. That's the only Applebee's. Well, let me back up. We started rolling out breakfast this summer, trying to use the box. We pay the rent anyway. But up until this summer, it was the only Applebee's in the world, to the best of my knowledge, that served breakfast. And this year, as everybody's experiencing this downturn in the market, trying to get additional day parts, we've rolled out breakfast in 6 or 7 of our.
So where the other one?
We just started it in Harlem on 125th Street. We do it in Riverdale on 225th Street, very successfully actually. We do it up on 50th and Broadway, which is the second largest Applebee's in the world, by the way, in a 3-story, the only 3-story restaurant in the world. And we're doing it in Sheepshead Bay, and one other place, in the Bronx Terminal Market.
So there at least you're having three different opportunities a day.
Yes.
So the one over there, you also had an Applebee's and a Chevy's downtown in Battery Park, but after 9/11, you opened up just before 9/11 over there
9
too.
months before 9/11, and actually the Chevy's was used as a triage center. After that, and I actually went down there and volunteered for a week, almost a week, not a full week, about 5 days, helping out and driving trailer trucks of bottled water, bringing Vicks down for people's noses because of the odors, and it was a horrific time. Our restaurants, we had, as I said, 2 restaurants. They closed for about a year, 10 months, one, and a year the other, but they never got going again. We actually closed them both permanently this past year.
And then this year, earlier this year, you opened up the Applebees on 125th Street in Harlem.
That's correct.
So, I mean, you've really done an interesting. But, you know, you and I were talking, and I think the greatest thing, one of the facts that you've been rated as the #1 franchise.
We were franchisee of the year last year.
Right, and you also have the highest grossing. But what you've done for the community is you have, what, 3,000 employees?
Yes.
And you have this managerial program, and you give them cars, and you take them on vacations. Why don't you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, I think I imported that from the printing business because relative.
I think you imported from the sociology courses. What you said, you said that in the 1981 article in Inc.
It may be, but I've always been interested in people, so it's hand in glove being in this business and having the numbers of people that we have. But what we do, what I took a look at was the turnover in the printing, in the graphic art, in the restaurant business. Turnover in our space, which is casual dining. There's fast food, casual dining, and fine dining. In our space, turnover is about 200%. And I thought, well, if we can eliminate that turnover thing, the teams get to play a little better. Just like a basketball team, the guy throws behind his back as they're dribbling. The other guy knows to catch it. So I tried to think, how can we make that more permanent in terms of employment? So we started small. We didn't think we'd have nearly this many people. I said, anybody that's in a management position, a general manager or a kitchen manager, who stays with us for 18 months, no bogeys, no metrics, no hitting things, we'll get them a car. And we limited, and still do, to the kitchen manager and the general manager, because those are the 2 guys you can't do without in the restaurant business, and to run your restaurants if you're going to have multiple sites. So
you've motivated your people. We have like a minute left. You're married for what, 44 years?
Yes.
And you have 2 children?
Yes.
And your children are?
Melanie and Nikki.
And what do they do?
Melanie sells water to restaurants. Sheer coincidence. I guess like I got in the printing business with my father, sheer coincidence. Nothing to do with us or me. Works for a company called Natura Water out of Dallas, Texas. Sells bottled water.
So that's Melanie.
And Nikki works for us at Apple Metro.
So, you know, if you had to look at it this way, the kid who was born in Brooklyn, grew up in New Jersey, who's had his, scaled Everest up to 25,000, but that's still high enough for me, who's been involved with lots of interesting things, 35 restaurants today, the largest operator. You've been truly a builder of the metro region. Well, and that's why you're chairman and CEO of Apple Metro, and I'd like to thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Michael. Appreciate your having me.
Is made possible by grants from Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, and Perfect Building Maintenance, New York Community Bank, Kilroy Architectural Windows, Inc., New York's window company, Capital One Bank, Greenberg Traurig, LLP. Additional funding for this program is made possible by grants from AVR Realty Company, LLC, Briarwood Organization, Beechwood Organization, C.B. Richard Ellis, Cushman & Wakefield, Dime Savings Bank of Williamsburg, Hal Fettner, Durst Fettner Residential, First American Title Insurance Company of New York, F.J. Siami Construction, Friedman LLP, Gemini Real Estate Advisors LLC, Investors Savings Bank, Jack Jaffa and Associates Real Estate Consultants, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, Madison Realty Capital, Massey Knackel Realty Services, M&T Bank, Markham LLP, Marcus and Millichap Real Estate Investment Services, Meridian Capital Group, The Moynihan Group, Margolin Weiner and Evans LLP, Newmark Knight Frank, Orphanides and Associates, SJP Properties, Sterling and Sterling Inc., Stonehenge Partners, Urban American, The Wickoff Group.